Now, I want to get straight to a topic that you've been hearing about with some regularity over the last week or so, and that is the call that is spreading now. I might say that it's metastasizing, but the call for dismantling police departments, to eliminate police departments, beginning with, I suppose, Exhibit A, given the current turmoil, would be the Minneapolis Police Department, because as everybody knows, this is the precinct, or the what's the word I want here? It was under their, it was in their territory. I know that's not quite the right word, where George Floyd was killed. It was one of their police officers that perpetrated this. So they have come under great scrutiny, that's for sure. And so there is a strong push to dismantle police departments in general, but that one in particular. And as I was sharing with the team before the show began this morning, you'll notice that there's a fair amount of ambiguity about what they intend to replace the police departments with. So I'd like to offer a few thoughts on this. First of all, however, just to give you a sense of context, the crime rate in New York City just this month, so we're talking, May, this past month. Here are the statistics for crime in New York City. 94%. Okay, I got to stop and rephrase this. This is a comparison of the crime in New York City as it's being reported by the New York Police Department's Division of Statistics. So it's coming from their own sources, and this is a comparison of these various crimes and categories of crime compared to last year. So within 1 year, last month of May till the year before, murder has gone up 94.1%. Grand larceny auto, you come out in the morning and your car's gone, 69.6% higher this last month of May than last May. Shooting incidents, 62.5% higher compared to last year. Shooting victims, 50% higher. I guess they're, 12.5% of the time their aim is bad, which is how I interpret that. But 50% higher this last month in terms of shooting victims. And burglaries have gone up 33.7%. Again, this is sourced by the Police Department of New York, and it is their department that is in charge of providing statistics. And it gives, I'm looking at a table here, and it gives from 2020 to 2019, the change in percentage, and then it shows it 28-day period, year-to-date, 2-year, 10-year, 27-year. So those statistics, to my mind, seem alarming, especially for a city that's already known, historically at least, for being a very violent place. There have been some lulls in the crime rate and a variety of factors and reasons for that. But let's use that as a backdrop and say if the murder rate is up 94.1%, grand larceny auto up 69.6%, shooting up, burglaries up, does it really make sense to, quote unquote, dismantle police departments? And if so, what would replace the police department? Now, what I'd like you to listen to right now, courtesy of CNN, is an interview in which you're going to hear a woman explaining why and how the police department in Minneapolis should be dismantled. Now, they're using a term here, dismantling it. What does that mean exactly? It could mean to take it apart, you strip it down to just a bucket of bolts, and then you rebuild it from the ground up. That's one possibility. Another possibility that people are not saying, at least not in so many words, is to dismantle the police department, strip it down to a bucket of bolts, throw the bolts away, and then roll in something new and different. That would not be the police. So before we get into some of those issues, why don't you listen? This is the Minneapolis City Council President, Lisa Bender. She's on CNN, and she's explaining why, and to some extent how, she and others want to defund and dismantle the police department of Minneapolis. Take a listen.
So what are you trying to do? Are you hoping by dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department that you will be getting rid of the police department?
I think in Minneapolis, watching George Floyd's death and the actions of the 4 police officers that were involved has been a huge wake-up call for so many in Minneapolis to see what many already knew, which is that our police department is not keeping every member of our community safe. And so I think step one for us is to tell the truth. 9 council members from communities all across the city of all different backgrounds standing together to tell the truth and say, this system isn't working for too many of our neighbors for too long. Our reform efforts have failed, and we have done many attempts at reform and new leadership in the department and many things. And we still see this tragic death. And so I think the wake up of our community is what's driving the city council's announcement yesterday. And now the hard work begins for us to rebuild systems that really work to keep all of our community safe.
But to be clear, you're not talking about reform. The word dismantle is intentionally different than reform. This is more than reform. This is dismantling. I mean, activists who support this
let's stop here for a second. You'll notice that she asked her a direct question. The first question was, are you saying that you want to replace the police department? And you notice she didn't give an answer. She just got into her pitch. Well, you heard what she just said. So she did not answer that question. And now the question's being asked again. Keep in mind, this is CNN. So by and large, the people that you hear on CNN, they're already very favorable toward these kinds of things in any case, politically speaking. But listen, roll it back a couple seconds, please, Cyrus, and let's get to the beginning of her question again. So she's kind of restating the same question. She's looking for a little bit more specificity. And let's listen from there.
Intentionally different than reform. This is more than reform. This is dismantling. I mean, activists who support this are calling this a police-free future.
Yeah, and a lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police back in 2017 when we were running for office. And I answered yes to that question. To me, that future is a long way away, and it would take an enormous amount of investment in things that we know work to keep people safe. I mean, for a lot of folks in our community, stable housing is a safety issue. Having access to healthcare is a safety issue.
Okay,
and so
let's pause. Let's pause. Okay, you notice that she's juxtaposing two things. On the one hand, she's talking about inequities in housing and all the other ways in which there are disparities and inequities. That's all given. We know that those things do exist. How best to resolve those issues, that's a matter of prudential judgment. But in any case, you notice that she's talking about we have to keep people safe. How do you do that without a police force? How do you keep, for example, black businesses safe from, I don't know, KKK people? How do you keep them safe if you don't have any police? I mean, who, as the song says, who are you going to call? Who are you going to call if somebody is doing something illegal, harmful to you, perhaps even deadly to you, and there is no police force to call? You dial 911 and you get crickets. See, this is part of this narrative that I want to bring out. I want to kind of tease it out into the open. And I do believe that there is a plan in mind for what they want to replace the current model of police departments, with all of its flaws, with all the issues and problems that police departments have. I mean, keep in mind, it's a human institution. And if you have human beings involved, you will have problems. You'll have things that fall through the cracks. You'll have bad people. The majority of the people tend to do the right thing, or they try to do the right thing, but you're always going to have people who don't do the right thing and intend to do the wrong thing. So as we proceed for the next couple of minutes, listen and ask yourself if you're getting any real answer to the question, what are you going to replace this with? And she says things that everybody's going to agree with, like, we want to keep members of the community safe, but how are you going to do that without a police force? Let's continue.
One thing folks are asking is to stop investing so much money in this militarized police force and instead invest in the things that our community really needs. So, I know the statement was bold, and I stand by that bold statement, but the work ahead of us will be long. It will include every member of our community. It has to. And, I think we have very immediate things. We have a state action against our police department, which gives us legal mechanisms in the very short term. There's lessons from all over the country, all over the world that we're looking to take immediate steps while we work toward building the systems that we would need to imagine that future.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police-free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege, because For those
All
of
right,
us for whom this
stop. Okay, before we all throw up collectively, she's not going to answer that question either. Oh, I hear that. I hear what you're saying. Somebody's going to come in through your window in the middle of the night and harm you. Well, that's really your privilege speaking. What? I just want to go to sleep at night and not get murdered. Well, that's your privilege. That's your white privilege. You're so privileged that you want to go to sleep at night and not have somebody come in and steal your stuff and kill you. Does any of that make any sense to you? The freaky thing about this is that actually does make some sense to some people. Before we continue, I want to share with you, well, I tell you what, we'll finish this up, just a little bit more from CNN in this interview, and then I want to share with you some other details that may broaden your mind on this issue. Let's continue.
And I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
Okay,
and so
pause. Let's pause. So because some police officers, thankfully, a very small minority compared to the total of police officers who are doing their very best and risking their lives and trying to help us and keep us safe and dealing with the worst of humanity on a daily basis, because there are some flaws in the system and there are a few bad people here and there in the system, therefore you don't have a right to be safe because there are some people who are not safe. Therefore, nobody gets to be safe. That's what she's saying. It's your privilege that's telling you that you should be safe. And if somebody in the inner city or in some other situation is not safe, or if the police racially profile, or if there's some other reason that police are, as she pointed out, harming people, therefore nobody gets to be safe at all. Now, she's not actually saying it in those words, but that's what she's saying. How much do we have left on this audio, Cyrus? Okay, so let's listen to the last little tidbit. I'll be quiet, and then we'll come back and commentate on this.
And so in the very immediate, we have to lean into whatever changes we can make in our existing police department. You know, I think we look to cities like Camden, New Jersey, that completely restructured their department as we build up systems. And we've already done that. We are not starting from scratch. We have invested in community-based safety strategies. We have knowledge in our community across the city. We've done an analysis of all the reasons people call 911 and have looked at ways we can shift the response away from armed police officers into a more appropriate response for mental health calls, for some domestic violence calls, for health-related issues. And so the groundwork is laid already in Minneapolis for us to build on that, to learn from folks around the world, but really also to listen to our community and put those community voices front and center as we build up those systems even further.
On a political point, as a Democrat, are you worried that you have just handed President Trump a great talking point or slogan or battle cry for his reelection to be able to say, see, Democrats want to get rid of your police?
Let me pause
First
here.
they come to take...
Let me pause here. I don't care about that, okay? And I don't think that we should care about that right now. The whole political thing, it's all a political football, a hot potato. And the strategery that's going on here, it doesn't interest me. I mean, eventually, sure, we're all going to have to deal with that issue. But for the time being, I'd rather not descend into the political swamp, the political quicksand. So this is going to spread. We're seeing it spread. Now, here are a few things that impinge upon this topic. Okay, here's an article here on the idea of a police-free future. And this coming, as you heard, from the Minneapolis City Council. Decades of police reform efforts have proved that the Minneapolis Police Department cannot be reformed and will never be accountable for its actions. This is coming from the City Council. We are here today, they say, to begin the process of ending the Minneapolis Police Department and creating a new transformative model for cultivating safety in Minneapolis. Now, that sounds nice, doesn't it? It's new, it's transformative, it's different, probably going to be upgraded. Lots of nice bells and whistles. Now, it's a study in ambiguity. It sounds good, but what does it mean exactly? This new transformative model. They go on. We recognize that we don't have all the answers about what a police-free future looks like. I do, by the way. I know what a police-free future looks like. If you want to know what a police-free future looks like, it's easy for me to say. Turn on any of the network news programs and watch the looting and rioting and smashing and burning and torching of police cars and killing, and people being beaten up simply because they're standing outside their businesses saying, hey, please don't loot my business. I'm a minority. Could you please not loot my business? And then the person gets beaten to a pulp. That's what a police-free future would look like. That's what it would look like. And that's, I think, kind of what they want, if you ask me. Now, not for everybody, but for some people, they kind of would be okay with that. The city council says, we recognize we don't have all the answers about what a police-free future looks like, but our community does. We're committing to engaging with every willing community member in the city of Minneapolis over the next year to identify what safety looks like for you. We'll be taking intermediate steps towards ending the Minneapolis Police Department through the budget process and other policy and budget restrictions over the coming weeks and months. We cannot help but wonder, people are asking, what is this going to lead to? Where does this, what is the end game here? So let's imagine that the city that you live in, let's say you live in Houston or Dallas or Detroit or LA, wherever you live, imagine if the police department was shut down and there was no 911 response, whether it's white-collar crime, whether it is violent crime, whatever it may be. There's no one you can call. Oh, wait, there is somebody that you can call. It's this new transformative model for cultivating safety. Some people, by the way, are arguing that those who would fill this void where the police officers used to be would not be allowed to have guns, that they would not be allowed to respond to lethal force with lethal force. In other words, the people who are out on the streets doing all these terrible things, these criminal acts, they would have by far have superior firepower over whoever it would be in this transformative model that replaced the police departments would show up with what? A baton? What would they show up with? Now, here's an article by Michael Snyder that gets into the phenomenon that we've been seeing on TV in recent days on extreme looting and how looters are using, as Michael Snyder describes it, absolutely crazy tactics. Let me just share some of this with you. And as you're listening to this, think about this. I mean, do you think that the looters would say, oh, okay, the police are gone. Whew, they got dismantled and there are no more police, none of that stuff anymore. We now have a new transformative model, whatever that may be. Okay, we can all go home now and start gaming again. We don't need to be looting anymore. We don't need to be destroying and stealing, stuff, merchandise and stuff, because the model has been changed. Therefore, do you think they're going to go home? Do you think that they're going to be incentivized to stop the crazy things that they're doing? Nobody thinks that. So listen to some of this. He says, I'm going to start with looters in Fairfield, California. They decided to use a telescopic forklift to break down the doors at a Best Buy store. A particularly brazen attempt by looters to storm a store in Fairfield, California, caught on video, showing them commandeering what appears to be a telescopic forklift. It appears to be a telescopic forklift because it is a telescopic forklift, to force their way in. The video has emerged showing vandals using heavy equipment on the doors of the Best Buy store in Fairfield, a city in Solano County, located between San Francisco and Sacramento. Now that criminals, he says, have seen how much they can get away with, they are going to become more emboldened than ever. And the entire West Coast is going to be a major danger zone for the foreseeable future. In the East Bay, police say that caravans of cars full of looters have been roaming around systematically, searching for targets. Authorities have been trying to crack down on these caravans of looters, but that has proven to be quite difficult because many of them are heavily armed. Elsewhere in Northern California, one group of looters just pulled off a stunning heist like something out of Fast and Furious. Police in Northern California are searching for suspects after rioters reportedly stole more than 70 premium cars from a dealership near San Francisco last Sunday night. San Leandro Chrysler Dodge Jeep dealership owner Carlos Hidalgo said that although he blocked the exits as a precaution, the thieves started ramming until they could get out. They took out chains and fence posts. This means that at least 70 looters must have descended upon the dealership simultaneously. 70 looters, at least, they're saying. Simultaneously, so that means this is coordinated. They didn't just bump into each other planning to, oh, you're here too? This is coordinated. So they show up simultaneously because, after all, each of those 70 cars had to have a driver. This isn't just the West Coast dealing with these things. The following is how Rachel Olding described the looting that was witnessed in Midtown Manhattan. She says it's hard to describe how rampant the looting was tonight in Midtown and how lawless it was. Complete anarchy. Literally hundreds of stores up and down Broadway, Fifth Avenue, Sixth Avenue, kids ruling the streets like it was a party. If law enforcement authorities can't even keep up that secure area, if they can't secure that area, do you think that any city in the entire country is truly safe at this point? Think about your city. Some of these looters, it's reported by the New York Post, rolled up in luxury SUVs. I saw one video of just insane looting going on in the streets of New York, and a group of looters rolled up in a Bentley, in a Rolls-Royce Bentley, which costs, I think the starting price is like $350,000. Now, maybe they purchased that. Perhaps they're making their payments dutifully every month, or maybe they stole it, but who knows? It's like something out of Dante's Inferno. One video, filmed by Justine Miller and Keith Feldman, shows a group of men in masks hopping out of two cars and charging through a smashed door in Soho in New York City before running back outside carrying boxes of goods on Monday night. Now, this scene is being repeated over and over again. In Philadelphia, the looting has been absolutely insane. He says, just yesterday I discussed the fact that looters were allowed to loot one drugstore for 15 hours straight. And that's because the police department either didn't show up, wouldn't show up, couldn't show up. Elsewhere in the city, one very ambitious looter ended up dying in a botched attempt to blow up an ATM machine. The looter was killed in this botched ATM explosion in Philadelphia. The police believe it was part of a coordinated effort to raid 30 machines across the city over a series of 2 nights. Police said the 24-year-old man died early Tuesday after several hours of attempting to break into an ATM with explosives in the north of the city. I mean, that's bank robbery. People go to jail for historically anyway, go to jail for a long time. And there are more and more horrifying details about the absolute insanity that is going on in the streets of America all over the place. Now, I hope that it hasn't hit where you live, but if you live in one of these cities, as many of our listeners do, because Relevant Radio is a national network, 171 plus stations, and we are in all of these markets, I know it is affecting you and your children. Now, if the city council of Minneapolis has its way and they decide to dismantle, which they've already decided to do, if they're successful, and I suspect they probably will be successful, unless more mature minds prevail, then the question becomes, what are they going to replace this with? Now, we've seen some inklings of what that could be. And when we return, yes, I will get into your phone calls, but I will offer you a few possibilities of what could be the replacement model for your police force. So when you dial 911, and you're hoping and praying that the police car shows up soon because you have a situation and you need somebody there soon, that's not going to happen if the Minneapolis City Council has its way and other city councils around the country have their way if they follow suit. So I'll offer you, for your consideration, a few possibilities of what could replace your local police department. I'll be right back with more of the Patrick Madrid Show right after this. Right now, though, we're talking about this, what I truly believe to be an insane, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, because you know why? Because I'm on live radio. So I want to be really discreet. There is this insane, misguided, and that's a very benign term here, effort underway to defund your local police force. It's happening right now in the city of Minneapolis. And by all accounts, it looks like it's going to happen. They're talking about wanting to replace the existing model. Now, they want to replace it with something that they don't really describe. They never really get around to defining it. If you were listening in the first half hour of the program today, you heard an interview with one of the members of the city council in Minneapolis. She's being quizzed by the lady on CNN. And the lady on CNN asks her 2 or 3 times, point blank, you're talking about dismantling. What are you going to replace the police department with? And she never answers the question. And that type of ambiguity, I do believe, is purposeful, because if they were to say what they, I think, are thinking, and I have a few theories, I'll try these out with you, then people would recoil from that. So first thing I want to do is say, we've seen this happen before in times of great tumult and chaos. And you've seen it, for example, I mean, perhaps the most notorious example would be in the 1920s in Germany, when the Weimar Republic was dying and it was about to be replaced by Nazism, National Socialism. And you know who was at the forefront of all that? Adolf Hitler. And one of the phenomena of Hitler's rise to power in the late 1920s and in the entire decade of the 1930s was a phenomenon known as brown shirts. Brown shirts that was the name that was given to this cadre of young, tough guys, thousands and thousands of them, that Hitler recruited into his own personal private militia. And they wore this uniform, this sort of quasi-paramilitary uniform, and the shirts were brown. That's where the term comes from. And he would use them on his political opponents. They would show up and they would break up political meetings of those who were opposed to him. They would show up and they would break up stores, like smash stores, beat people. And then eventually, as the metastasization continued, the brown shirts morphed into the party, the Nazi Party, and then it eventually became official. But he used this unofficial ad hoc militia that he had recruited to give the muscle to his political ambitions. And he was successful in basically beating down all of the political opponents and the political obstacles that were in his way by the naked use of force by these brown shirts. Now, that's just like the poster child of what I'm talking about. And this has happened in many different places. It happens now in different places. Another example, Iran. Iran has been in the grip since 1979, when the Islamic Revolution there took place, and Ayatollah Khomeini. And if you're not old enough to remember all that, crack open the history books and read what happened, because Iran, prior to the rise of the Ayatollahs, was a secular Muslim state. Yeah, the Shah was a dictator. That's true. But what they got in exchange for the Shah being toppled was light years worse than what they had before. Nowadays, if a woman walks out on the street without wearing the Islamic garb that she's required by law to wear, according to the Islamic law, she can be beaten, she can be put in jail, and sometimes these people get disappeared because they don't adhere. Now, the reason I'm bringing up Iran is because the Ayatollahs, they have their own militia, their own kind of police force, and what their job is to go out and make sure that you're not doing something that you shouldn't be doing, at least not according to Islamic law as they interpret it. And there are what are called morality police. You'll see this, for example, in Saudi Arabia. Just look that up on the YouTube sometime. Look up Saudi Arabia morality police. You'll see videos of these kind of militia that the royal kingdom uses to enforce its version of Islamic law. And they come out in the streets with whips. And they will whip you. If you are walking around doing something that they don't like, they'll come up and just start beating on you. Now, by comparison to killing people and destroying property and homes and things like that, that's rather tame, although it's bad enough. But these are some examples of the kind of paramilitary, para-police force groups that have been used effectively by oppressive regimes, such as the ones that I just mentioned. And there are any number of other examples. You may remember that when President Obama was in office, he too was actually working on a kind of a paramilitary, para-police force of youths that he was going to train to be community organizers and people of action on the streets and things like that. And I do remember, this is now going back 6-7 years ago, there was a question like, well, what does that mean exactly? What would that become? How might that be used against political opponents? Now, it never actually came to fruition, at least not as far as I'm aware, but the groundwork was laid. And the idea for it was floated. And quite frankly, there were quite a few people in this country who were okay with that. So this is where things are heading right now. And if you look around at the political discord, the civil discord, the looting, the rioting, and all the things that go with that, ask yourself this question. Do you really think it's a great idea at this point in time, here and now, with all the troubles that we've got, to shut down your local police department? I think most sentient people, most sentient thinking people are going to say, heck no. We need our police now more than ever. Now, do we need a moral code that governs police officers? Yes, we already have one. It's not being carried out in some cases. We need to fix that. Is it possible that a local police force is using too much force? Yeah, we've seen that too. Do we need tanks and other types of military hardware in every locality? Probably not. Maybe in some places, maybe in some of the cities that we've talked about thus far who are seeing skyrocketing crime, where the people who are doing the crimes are very well provisioned when it comes to firearms. I think it's pretty safe to say that if police are going to respond to those incidents and try to apprehend those criminals, they should be at least as well armed as those people are. Otherwise, it'll be a bloodbath. But this idea of eliminating police departments is gaining ground. And I do believe this is a coordinated attempt to destabilize this country. Doesn't mean the country's perfect. In many ways, far from it. I think we can all agree on that. I hope we can all agree on that. But the path to unity and healing and peace, for heaven's sake, could we just have a little peace, maybe, without store windows being smashed and graffiti all over the place, public buildings and things, and much worse things than that? My wife and I, we attend a parish that's not downtown Columbus, Ohio, but it's real close to downtown. It's in the inner city. In fact, our parish is in an area of the city that nobody, other than maybe college students and things, nobody lives in that area. There aren't like homes in that area, maybe some apartments here or there. Everybody drives from a distance to get to this parish. It's really great, run by Dominican priests. It's wonderful. But in any case, directly across the street from our parish is a homeless shelter. And it's actually a wonderful thing, especially for us who drive up in our air-conditioned automobiles and we get out of our cars dressed in our Sunday best to go to church. It's good for us to see and be near, have some proximity to people who are living on the street. Now, many of them, they're homeless by choice. There are drugs involved. There is a life of crime involved in some cases. How do I know this? Because the parish hires and keeps on staff armed security guards, because it's that kind of a locality where you need somebody who is armed and there to keep an eye on things, because sometimes people do get accosted. So in talking to the security officer at our parish, I mean, he tells stories about all kinds of really dangerous things that are just a block away or less from the moms and dads, boys and girls who are coming and going to Mass. But it's still a good thing for us, I do believe, because it allows us to not forget about these people. The people who have to go to this soup kitchen to be fed 3 times a day or to get clothing. It's an important reminder to us that these people are here, because it would be easy to forget about them, quite frankly. So that's something I consider a blessing in my own parish. But I look at that and I think to myself, what about even for those people? What if they're getting beaten up? What if they're getting harassed or forced into the sex trade or something like that? Who will help them if we don't have a police department? Who's going to bring about law and order? In a way, it's kind of like saying we need to abolish fire departments and replace them with a transformative alternative. What? Yeah, because, we just need to replace the fire departments. What would the world look like if we didn't have police departments? Well, we wouldn't be able to see the world because it would be full of smoke, and you'd probably be dead. But if we didn't have fire departments, we wouldn't be able to see the world for those reasons. And I honestly believe that this effort to try to eliminate police departments, they're using the term dismantle right now, which kind of gives the suggestion that, okay, we're going to break it down to a bucket of bolts and we're going to rebuild it into something better than before. I don't think that's really what they want. They being the people like the city council of the city of Minneapolis and many others like them. And what I fear is that maybe what they want is something that could be far more pernicious and oppressive in the long run for the vast majority of people if they have their way. So this is a story. It's unfolding right now. It's going to continue to unfold, and I'll do my best to offer you my thoughts as things do unfold. But I wanted to at least get this out there in the open, because if enough people sit back and say, well, I'm just going to let this ride. I'm not sure what I'm going to say, so I won't say anything. If enough people sit back and do that, then I think you can be pretty confident that you're going to be living in a very different and probably very much more dangerous world in the not too distant future.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.